Joining us on the KQ hotline is Jim Davidson, author of the books The Next Everest, Surviving the Mountain's Deadliest Day, and Finding the Resilience to Climb Again. Good morning, Jim. How are you?
I'm doing great. Great to be with you.
It's wonderful to have you. I'll tell you what, even when the publicist, a guy by the name of Art, who we've been working with for a long, long time, he coordinates these interviews with A-listers, all sorts of people, fascinating folks like yourself. Even when Art gets on the line and says, by the way, Jim's up in a couple of moments, fascinating story, you've got a story to tell. So if you wouldn't mind, sir, because we only have a finite amount of time, would you take us back to April 25th of 2015 as you're near the peak of Mount Everest, if I have my facts right?
Yes, I was on Mount Everest, and that day became an incredible day in Nepal and a terrible tragedy. I was climbing the mountain. We got to the first camp. We called Camp 1 at about 20,000 feet. And at 11:56 a.m., the biggest earthquake in 81 years slammed into the Himalayas and shook Mount Everest. We were on the glacier, and we heard a huge noise coming down the mountain. An avalanche triggered by the earthquake came down 4,000 vertical feet. A few seconds later, a second avalanche started on the other side of us, came down 6,000 vertical feet, and they both started rushing at us at Camp 1. We're scared out of our minds. We're trying to get out of the way of the avalanches, and that's when the first waves of the earthquake rippled through the glacier beneath our feet and lifted our tent up in the air, and we went up and down in that tent like being on a life raft on the ocean.
Good God.
Jeez.
So, I mean, was it relatively smooth before the earthquake hit? Were there any indications that would make an experienced climber like yourself or your team go, something just doesn't feel right today?
No, it was a cloudy day, but everything had gone pretty well. We had climbed through the night, because we do that to try and be most safe with the frozen ice cliffs so they don't collapse on us during the heat of the day. We climb at night. Everything went fine, and I'm actually a geologist for 20 years, and it's very difficult to predict earthquakes. So when it showed up, nobody had any warning at all. Just suddenly, the avalanches start raining down, and the glacier's heaving like you're on some kind of roller coaster ride.
We're speaking with Jim Davidson, author of The Next Everest, Surviving the Mountain's Deadliest Day. So, Jim, the moment you realize things are askew, and that's putting it mildly, how long does it take you to react to something like that? Because there's that bleep moment, I'm on Everest, all this is going on. Do you freeze? Do instincts kick in? What do you do?
It was a blend of all of those things. Yes, your brain's trying to understand what's going on because you've never been through this kind of thing before. The ground is moving like it's jello. Avalanches are roaring at you from two sides, and it's all happening at once. So there are a few seconds of, oh my goodness, what do I do? But I've been a climber for 33 years, and I've been in other tough situations in the mountain, and I know that all you can do in a tough situation like that is try and increase your chances a little tiny bit by taking positive steps. So I pulled my hat on in case I get buried by the snow. I'll be a little warmer. And I grabbed my avalanche beacon, which sends out a signal. So if I get buried, hopefully my compatriots can find me under the snow. And we got out of the tent because we didn't want to be in the tent because that'll act like an anchor and drag us under the avalanche. So all of those are micro steps to try and improve your chances a little bit. You just have to try and get through that moment. And then when things calm down, then ask yourself, what can I do to improve the situation for myself and my friends and my neighbors?
Well, how much time do you actually have before you realize that this is happening and then it happens?
It's about in the range of about 10, 20 seconds because the avalanches were coming at us. I had just enough time to get my avalanche beacon on. When I got outside, I turned on my GoPro camera, and it ran for about 1 minute of avalanche time and about 3 or 4 minutes of the wind blowing around from the avalanches. So the whole thing was over in about 4 or 5 minutes. But, of course, now you're scared out of your mind because you realize how incredibly exposed we are.
So then the avalanche hits, the earthquake hits, the avalanche hits. You know, the moment after that, describe, where are you? Are you buried in snow? Did you find a nook and a cranny? I mean, what does that look like?
Well, as I described in my book, The Next Everest, we got very fortunate. Those huge avalanches from two sides kind of ran out of speed, and they got swallowed by giant cracks in the glacier, which are called crevasses. Big enough you can throw an apartment building inside them, and it would just disappear. So those giant cracks basically absorbed the avalanche, so it didn't quite reach us. They both stopped a couple hundred yards away. So we were okay. Nobody hurt or killed in Camp 1, which was amazing. But sadly, when we got on the radio to the rest of our team, we found out that base camp down below us had an avalanche, but their avalanche had rocks in it, lots and lots of rocks. And those rocks came flying down and went almost a mile and a half sideways, ripped into base camp, took out about 100 tents, sadly wounded 70 people, and killed 18 people, making it the deadliest day ever on Mount Everest.
How fast is that wall of snow moving?
Usually in the range of a couple 100 miles per hour.
Oh, my God.
Jeez. So there's no outrunning anything.
No. Oh, my Lord.
No. It depends on the type of avalanche, but a very slow one would be 60 to 100 miles an hour, and the fast ones would be a couple 100 miles an hour. It just rolls right across the terrain like a bulldozer. And that's the thing. I mean, when you're trapped in there in those valleys, there's nowhere to run.
So we'll urge people to pick up the book, The Next Everest, Surviving the Mountain's Deadliest Day, to find out, of course, what happens next. But how far up the mountain were you? Because I believe in the bio, the presser, it says you were close to the peak. How far away were you?
Well, we were on the lower flanks of Mount Everest at about 20,000 feet. We did not go up to the upper part of the mountain on that trip in 2015 because after the earthquake and the avalanches, it was a disaster for Nepal. So we just simply abandoned our climb and spent a couple of weeks in the avalanche area and the earthquake area trying to help out, recovering medical supplies from a medical field hospital that had been buried and helping the Nepali people disassemble houses and passing the hat, giving them some money to start with. So we were up there for a couple of weeks, left the country, and I came back in another year in 2017 and tried to climb again.
One of the things that you have said, you said you were intrigued after surviving the massive earthquake and avalanches. You were intrigued by so many inaccurate media reports about what conditions are like on Everest. So as a climber and an environmental scientist, I'm quoting here, I want to provide the readers with a clear-eyed view of what climbing Mount Everest is like. So what are some of these misconceptions that the general public is led to believe by inaccurate media reports?
Yes, I'm an environmental scientist, and when I came back from Everest the first time, I heard people saying, the mountain's covered in trash. And I was like, really? I didn't see that. So as an environmental scientist, I try to collect the data. And there have been about 35 expeditions over the years since 1975 that have worked to clean up some of the mess on Mount Everest. There is still some old messes, because for the first 50 years, people threw their trash on the ground like we used to do before the environmental movement in the 70s came along. So there are some old messes. We still need to do more work up there. But the mountain's not covered in trash. I saw it. I've seen the cleanups going on. We've brought about 170,000 pounds down over the decades. And the other one is people think that the mountain's covered with human waste. So I'm a scientist, so I worked up a spreadsheet. I calculated how many people were up there, how much human waste is on the mountain, and the answer is less than 1/10,000th of the mountain has been impacted by human waste. And so those things are grandiose statements in the media, but they're not an accurate projection of what the mountain is like now.
What do the locals, and I know we have to wrap it up here in a second, but I've always wondered, the people of Nepal, what do the locals think about people from far and wide coming to climb Mount Everest and the impact that they may have on the region?
Well, it's a mixed response. I've been over the Himalayas 5 times and watched things change over there since 1992. They're certainly glad to have us visiting because if people don't go up to the mountains there, they're basically back to doing what they've done for hundreds of years, which is growing barley and potatoes, because that's all that will grow up there at elevations up to 17,000 feet. So having the tourists and the climbers come in has created opportunities. They've been able to produce lodges and move us through their environment in a safe way and help make a living off the tourism industry. But, of course, there are impacts. And the real answer is, in the long term, we need to work with the Nepali host to manage our trash, to manage our human waste, and be able to respect that environment like we do in our national parks here.
Before we cut you loose, somebody texted in on our text line here, why hasn't there been a movie made about this? And they're 100% right. Has Hollywood come knocking? Because this is something I'd go see.
Yeah, I've got an agent that manages that stuff, and she's had a few requests from Hollywood. Nothing's locked in yet, so we're still listening for sure. And, there's a whole lot more beyond the story that I think would make a heck of a good movie.
After what you've been through, sir, your only word should be, show me the money, is what you should be saying. So, Jim Davidson has been our guest. The Next Everest, Surviving the Mountain's Deadliest Day and Finding the Resilience to Climb Again. Jim, where is the book available?
The book's available at all your local bookstores. It just came out yesterday, and you can also get a copy through my website, speakingofadventure.com.
There you go. Jim, thank you for the conversation this morning. Good luck to you, sir. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Great being with you.
You too. There he goes. Jim Davidson, author of the book, The Next Everest, Surviving the Mountain's Deadliest Day.